It's wonderful that we can have these joint classes every now and then. It's quite a privilege to be able to talk to people from all over and from all over. I'm currently in the UK, in Scotland with Stacey and the boys. It's funny when Craig asked me to do a Bible study evening and he gave me the date. I realized, oh, I'm going to become a father. Well, going to be a father of two by that stage. And I thought, well, that's going to be excellent. Quite an easy topic for me there. I can look at, fatherhood and all these things that links into it. So, obviously, you all saw my topic for today is chasing the light. So, it has absolutely nothing to do with Asher that was born recently. But yeah, I should call Lyle actually the light because we've been doing lots of that instead, chasing Lyle. But nevertheless, no. Yeah, chasing the light is what I want to talk to everyone about today. And uh, a very specific kind of light. Some of us have been fortunate enough to have traveled to places where we have the opportunity to witness one of nature's most incredible spectacles, and some of you may have guessed it already, which are the Northern Lights. But majority of people, have only seen photos or videos of these, and some might not even know what I am talking about. So if you have been blessed enough to see these in real life, it's an incredible thing. If you've only seen photos or videos, don't worry, I was in the same situation for the longest time. And if you don't know what I'm talking about at all, here's just a very quick video as a refresher of what it is that I am speaking of. Hopefully this is sharing on you, but on your screen, you can see it's moving quite quickly on the video. It's because it's time lapse and it's over a very, very long period of time that this was taken. But you can see, these lights are absolutely stunning. You've got these bright greens and purples, and they're dancing the sky like something from a dream. But, unless you're living in that house that you can see on your screen there now, you can't just glance outside your window and see them. You have to leave your warm bed. You have to go into the freezing dark and wait, sometimes for hours. And it's uncomfortable, but people still do it. And you might ask why, because, the real reason is the view is worth it. And again, you might ask, well, how do I know? And to be honest with you, if you asked me that a couple months ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you what it's like because it's something I thought I would never be able to have the opportunity to see in person, at least not for a very, very long time until I got to travel to a country where it's quite prevalent. But here's a photo of Stacey and myself, and this was taken at around 1 a.m. In absolutely freezing temperatures. And we were just marveling at this view that we had. And you can't really tell, maybe you can, but I was wearing roughly 20 pieces of clothing and 7 layers at the time. And I still borrowed those gloves from Stacy, who was pregnant at the time. And all I can say is I don't do well with the cold. I don't do well with being awake at 1 a.m. without coffee. And I don't do well in the middle of a field in the pitch black where I don't know where I am or what's around me and there's weird noises going on. But was it worth it? Absolutely. Here's a photo that I took on that night with my camera, and these arcs and rays and spires, they danced in front of us like a private show. There was absolutely no one else around us at this time. There was an odd car driving in the distance, and they probably had absolutely no idea what was happening around them. So, what am I getting at? What is today's talk really about? Well, we watched these lights probably for 2, almost 3 hours, and it felt like it went by so quickly. But sitting in the car driving back home after seeing these, my mind and my heart just couldn't rest. I was filled with this wonder and awe at God's creativity, his power, his presence. And I actually felt so sad for everyone who, just like the ones in bed, not witnessing these lights with us in the world, might be in their comfort zones and missing out on witnessing God's presence in their lives. A verse that came to my head was Psalm 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. These northern lights, are like a heavenly light show that remind us of how powerful and creative God is. And, nature was created not just to be pretty and for us to look at, but I feel like nature and the creativity in it, it points us to God, to the ultimate creator. Why did he make these lights or sunsets or stars? He didn't really have to make them in the way he did. He didn't have to make them so beautiful, but he did. The Bible says, creation shouts about God's glory. The skies are like God's artwork, a way that, to show us his beauty, his power, his creativity. He doesn't just tell us that he's good in the Bible, he shows us through the world that he made. I'm sure that you can think to yourself, you know, maybe you've traveled somewhere or seen something in nature that's just made you think, wow, God is amazing. And these northern lights, they reminded me and they can remind us that God is real, He is powerful, and He loves beauty. The thing about the northern lights, like I said earlier, is you have to go and find them. You have to get out of bed, out of your house, and you won't see them when there's too much light around. I had to go stand in a pitch black field to be able to see these lights for myself. And John 1 verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It's interesting how when we are in a city or when there's lots of car lights, city lights, or even the moon when it's too bright, it can block out the northern lights. They only really shine in the darkest of places. And we can think of that spiritually as well. It's sometimes in the darkest parts of our lives that we really get to see God most clearly. And if we're honest, life can feel really dark sometimes. We've got anxiety, we've got pressure, we've got loss, or just really not knowing who you are at a stage in your life or what you're meant to be doing. But that's often where God really shows up. God's light doesn't disappear in dark times, it shines more clearly. Psalm 34, verses 18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." It's nice to know that it's okay to be in the dark. It's okay to be brokenhearted and crushed in spirit, as long as we look for the light, as long as we look for God and keep our faith in Jesus at that time. Now, speaking of faith, to see the aurora, to see these northern lights, you have to trust the process. It's one of those things where you can't really make it happen yourself. And faith is kind of like that, right? Hebrews 11, verse 1, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Even with all the apps and websites and trackers and satellites telling you, oh, the sun's going to have this flare and then the Earth's gravity is going to be like this, and everything's going to line up, and you should be in this kind of general area and you might see these lights. You're not guaranteed this light show. You have to kind of take a risk, You have to get out of bed and drive there and kind of wait about and see, well, is it going to happen? You have to take that step, that risk. And in the same way, following Jesus means that we are stepping into things that we can't always see clearly. Trusting in God's plan, sharing our faith with those around us, or doing the right thing when it's really hard. That's all almost like taking a risk because of our faith. Now, a story that came out of this evening that we had, it's not all just, oh, Llewellyn saw the light and he had this revelation. While we were out trying to spot these northern lights, to me, really, it looked like a whole bunch of nothing. It was just a pitch black sky, and I'm standing there wondering why we're wasting our time, freezing our faces off, just kind of being a grump because, well, that's how I am at 1 a.m. But my mother-in-law, Valerie, some of you know her and you know what she's like. She's there walking around, holding her phone up to the sky and just snapping photos of what looks like absolutely nothing. And me, being someone who finds himself to be a bit of an amateur photographer and enjoying taking photos. And I'm there with my fancy camera thinking, well, I'm not going to take photos of nothing. What is she doing, wasting her time? I thought she'd lost it. I said, why are you taking pictures of a blank sky? But then she showed me her screen. She showed me her phone. And, luckily with the technology of phones nowadays, they see, oh, it's dark. I'm going to take a bit of a longer exposure, keep the shutter open a couple extra seconds. And there on her screen, there were these northern lights starting to appear on the horizon, on her screen. They were bright and clear and beautiful. And I could see the colors. It was green and reds and purples. I was like starting to get excited. Her camera had picked up something that my eyes couldn't see yet. And that moment kind of hit me hard. What I thought was empty and pointless was actually full of wonder, and I just couldn't see it yet. And sometimes we don't see what God is doing in the moment, right? Sometimes we think He's not around. Sometimes we think He's not working in our lives. But just because we can't see Him and His presence in our lives, it doesn't mean He's not working. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7 says we live by faith and not by sight. And how true that verse is today more than ever. Maybe we're in a season, where it feels like our sky is just blank and nothing's changing. We're praying and nothing's happening, or we're trying to do what's right, but we just feel stuck. But the truth is, faith is sometimes trusting that God is there, even when our eyes don't see it yet. It's having the guts to keep taking pictures in the dark, believing the light will show up. You might think to yourself of a time where you didn't see God working, but then later you realized that He was in the background answering prayers that you didn't even know you were praying in the back of your mind. He was doing things, getting things ready for the greater good later. Now, this is where it gets a bit real. No one has ever seen these northern lights by just staying in bed, right? You've got to get up, go out, step into the cold, and leave the comfort behind. And it's the same thing with our walk with God. Luke 9:23 says very nicely, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Romans 12 verse 2, do not conform to the pattern of this world. It's all about comfort zones and getting out of them. It's easier to stay quiet than to pray out loud when we're in a friends group having a meal. It's more comfortable to scroll on TikTok or on Instagram than it is to read our Bible. It's easier to fit in with friends than it is to stand up for our faith. But the truth is, we will never grow in our faith if we always choose what's easy. God isn't calling us to a cozy, easy life in this world. He's calling us to something much greater, even if it's uncomfortable. And just like people leave the warmth of their homes to see these northern lights, we need to leave behind the comfort of a worldly life to fully experience God. If I had stayed inside that night, like I really wanted to do, I would have missed out. And the same is true spiritually. God calls us to something deeper, but we'll never see what He's doing if we never leave our bed, our comfort zone. Isaiah 40, verse 26 says, lift up your eyes and look to the heavens. He who brings out the starry host one by one and calls forth each of them by name. What was really interesting when we were standing there looking up at these lights is they stretch across the whole sky. It wasn't just this one little space in the sky where we saw them. It was 360 around us. They were the whole sky. It was as high as we could see. It was as far left as I could turn, as far right as I could turn. They were giant. Probably, stories and stories of buildings high. And it was absolutely incredible. But what's incredible to me is the same God who created those lights that was so massive and that we just don't know how they actually exist and why they're there and when they're going to be there. That same God who understands that complexity also knows my name. He knows me personally. He knows my fears. He knows my doubts. He knows my story. He's not just the God of the sky. He's the God of me and of you. We might feel like just one person in this huge world. And trust me, standing there on my own in this field and marveling at these giant things around me, I don't think I've ever actually felt smaller in my life. But I knew that God saw me standing there. He could see me. Just like he paints that sky on purpose, he's also painting in my life on purpose, working in my life with just as much creativity and intention. So to see these northern lights, we know that we need to leave what's familiar. We need to step into the cold and the dark, and we need to wait with expectation. And in the same way, to grow our faith, we need to leave our worldly comfort and we need to face spiritual challenges and we need to wait on God with hope. So I hope already I've convinced you to not stay in bed when God's inviting you out into the night, because that's where the light dances. That's where his work is happening. So I want you to think about how maybe you can get uncomfortable in the next week or month. Maybe it's praying out loud in your group or spending 15 minutes just in meditation with God when you're the kind of person that really just likes being busy, like me. Or maybe read a chapter of the Bible before your morning coffee. That's a real challenge for me. I struggle to do anything before my morning coffee. We could possibly invite a friend to church that we've not spoken to about our faith before. We could talk to someone who we know is hurting, and it might be uncomfortable for us to have to deal with someone else's hurt and to try and help them through something. Or maybe it's just saying no to temptation that we are struggling with ourselves. Because, like I said, faith doesn't grow when we aren't getting uncomfortable. The light doesn't show up until we step into the cold, dark night. From experiencing these lights myself, from knowing what I had to go through, the discomfort that I had to feel to see this wondrous thing, it's made me feel a lot less anxiety when it comes to fear and discomfort and distraction. It's those kind of things I understand now when I need to put them to the side and let them not stop me from seeing God's light in my life. And I've also understood now that the Northern Lights, they're not always guaranteed, but they are worth chasing. And the same is true in our life of faith. We need to chase the light. We need to step out. We need to be bold and get uncomfortable. We need to trust God and get ready to see something amazing. Amen.